Thank you, Fiona. Uh, Thank you for the opportunity to give you a talk about the Newport ship. And it's really an amazing story. It's been 23 years now since it was discovered. And what I want to do is cover the last 23 years in the next 45 minutes or so. And I want to talk about the discovery of the ship, the excavation, and the post-excavation work, and then talk about the artifacts and just in general what we've learned from the analysis of all the finds in the ship, and really bring you right up to speed with where we're at today. Talk a bit about conservation and where we're at with the project right now, and then where the project's headed in the future. And I'm very happy to answer questions at the end. So if I was giving the talk in person, I would ask anyone who was, if it was a local talk, asking, people in the room if they'd actually were able to see the ship in the ground. And you usually get a handful of people who were, uh, back in 2002 during the summer, they opened the site for a total of it was about 17 hours spread out over 3 different days in the summer of 2002. And they had around 22,000 people wait in the queue, sometimes for hours, to look over the edge of this cofferdam to see what this discovery was. And if you were willing to wait in line that long and look over the edge, this is what you would have seen: the intact remains of a massive medieval merchant vessel, beautifully preserved in the banks of the River Usk there in the heart of Newport. Slides aren't moving. There we go. So I thought I just good place to start is just give you a bit of context, and then we'll go right into the excavation. Uh, so I already mentioned it was 23 years ago, so that makes it the summer of 2002. It was discovered during building works for the big riverfront theater and arts center, and we've done a lot of work over the years, analysis of all sorts. And Nigel Nailing's been involved from the start and led the excavations and did a lot of dendrochronology, and we've had some really amazing results and through dendrochronology and dendroprovenance, and especially this relatively new application of oxygen isotope or stable isotope dendro. And just last year, half a dozen of these framing timbers here that went across the ship this way, they were tested, and they were all returned the same date. They were all cut down sometime between September of 1457 and March of 1458. And they were from the Basque Country in northern Spain. I'll show you exactly where on a map. But so that really gives us a very tight date for construction. So probably soon after, probably constructing in earnest in the 1458, 1459, launched sometime around then. And we know that it came into Newport between 1468 and 1469. Again, dendro dates of timbers found above and below the ship. And we also have dendro results of repairs on the ship, and we can see that the ship has some repairs here and there, and from the 1460s. And then we also can see, we believe the ship is being repaired in Newport, more of a refit in the late 1460s, and that 1468-9 period. And they found parts of a cradle structure underneath the ship, and it looks like it was right in the middle of this refit, perched up on this cradle. And something happened, ship heels over onto its side, maybe the cradle collapsed, and we have a huge tidal range here, 12, 13, 14 meters. And with the ship over on its side, every 12 hours, you have a flooding tide, just filled it with mud and water. They tried to drain it, they tried to pump it out, but eventually they just couldn't fight nature. They had to give up trying to save the whole ship. And they set about salvaging what they could still reach. And so what we have are what you see in this image. That's the articulated hull, but there were hundreds and hundreds of loose timbers found inside there and around the sides of the ship that were probably part of the ship, but during this salvaging, after it had fallen over, some of the pieces they attempted to salvage fell down into the mud and water, and they didn't try to retrieve them. So you have the articulated hull, and then you have these 1,000 or so loose timbers. So all in all, about 2,500 timbers comprising or were recovered during the excavation. Uh, Already mentioned it's late medieval, 1450s, 1460s. If you're into ships, I'll talk a little bit more about this. The ship is 100% clinker built or lap strake construction. That's where the planks overlap like steps on the hull, and they build that part first, and then they put the framing timbers or ribs in after that. It's a very Nordic, Vikings perfected it, of Nordic tradition, perfected it around 1,000 years ago. But this is very much an Iberian ship and built in this style, but just on a much bigger scale. We could talk all day about this transition in shipbuilding between clinker and carvel. We'll touch on it a bit, but it's just a fascinating period in terms of the changes in maritime nautical, shipbuilding technology. And that's what makes the ship so special. Is it's right in the middle of this transition. Within a generation or two, they're building huge carvel-built ships where they build the skeletons first, skeleton of the ship first, and then put the planks on flush laid on the sides. Newport ship is built, in this much older tradition, and so it's technologically it's just incredible to examine on from an engineering or technology perspective. So it wasn't just the ship that was found. They found around 1,000 artifacts and objects as well. They were recovered, and absolutely incredible preservation. And you can see that in this image here. They were able to walk, or in the early days, they were walking back and forth on the timbers of the ship in their steel toe caps. It was that rock solid. A couple of reasons for this. The ship is almost entirely made of oak. Almost all the structural pieces, maybe with the notable exception of the keel, which is beech. The structure is oak. They tarred the ship extensively, inside, outside. Every overlap, every seam was tarred, and I think it was tarred during its use life as well. So they maintained it by putting lots of tar on it. That helped preserve it. But probably above all, it was this most perfect burial environment. It's this cold, dark, wet, anoxic river mud, river clay, and basically the ship gets locked in there very quickly. And it's very simply put, the timbers are waterlogged, but they're not really decayed. Normally, you'd see that go hand in hand. Newport ship timbers, 500 plus years in a deep below the water table next to the river there, wonderfully preserved, but so well preserved it's actually been a bit of a nightmare to conserve. But we'll talk about that later on. So it's a very big ship, as I think you'll come to appreciate. None of these images actually show you the whole ship. There was no single shot of the entire ship at one time in the ground. So when you're in this case, we're looking towards the stern. This is the center line of the vessel, and this is the starboard side. This is the port side here. You'll notice all these concrete piles. They were driven in before they knew the ship was there, part of the building works. And then you can see some of the sheet pile cofferdam curtain they put in to excavate in this area. Tons and tons of great artifacts and environmental evidence was recovered, and really amazing how strong the signal is for that identifies it as Portuguese based, or at least predominantly trading with Portugal, and we'll get to that towards the end. And I mentioned we know that it came into Newport after the spring of 1468, and it seems to be salvaged by the end of 1469. So a couple of images of what the ship would have looked like, contemporary images, produced by an artist based on all of our archaeological work. Give you an idea what the ship would have looked like: three-masted, quite high castles, and very just kind of your standard big, roomy merchant ship. So on the map here, the forests are from this area. Behind or south of San Sebastian in the hinterlands here. It's quite some distance from the shore, but really strong returns on the dendrochronology results for this area for the framing timbers. Now, everything on board that you can get a really specific location on, let's say the ceramics, the coins, some of the very specific environmental evidence is from Lisbon south towards the Algarve. And then obviously the ships found up here in Newport in South Wales. We believe the ship was engaged in the wine trade. There were about 100 pieces related to casks, everything from the staves to the heads to the hoops, even the cork bungs. They were found throughout the ship. And we have great customs records that talk about this incredible wine trade in the 15th century. And, broadly speaking, 90% of what's coming into Bristol is wine in the 1450s and 60s. And so it looks like this ship, Newport ship, would have been engaged in this kind of north-south run across the Bay of Biscay, bringing wine up from the Iberian Peninsula in France up into, Bristol Channel, Severn Estuary. It would have had to trade with Bristol. That was the customs port, and Bristol's right across the water from us here. And it looks like it just, after one of these voyages, it popped over to Newport for repairs. Newport would have been an ideal place to refit a ship. It's not a commercial port, but it's got a huge tidal range, and where the ship was found would have it was an ideal place. They were actively repairing it at this time. This is the ship coming into. Again, same artist drawing the ship coming into Newport. You can see our castle there in the background. This was a very organized effort to get the ship where it was found. You didn't sail ships like this up the river. You would tow them up on a flooding tide. And in this case, where the ship was found, the only way they could have gotten it in there was on the highest of high tides. And they would have had about a 20-minute window to, make sure the ship was as light as it possibly could be. And then very carefully, but very unstable, very carefully draw it into the pill or side channel where it was found. And then they started this repair work, but never finished. Again, this is an image by Ann Lever, and it shows the ship here where it was found in the side channel or pill. And then you have it's just downstream from the castle, and you have the town bridge. These are still in the same spot. The ship was found just further down on that bank. So the excavation, they were redeveloping this entire site, weren't expecting to find anything significant. They put in, imagine the site's, say a football pitch in size. They put in a sheet pile cofferdam, this rectangle you see here, more or less at random across this entire site. They chose this one area to dig very, very deeply because it was going to be the orchestra pit right in front of the stage, in the main stage. The ship runs corner to corner inside that cofferdam. Complete chance find. If they'd put that cofferdam down here, they would have missed the ship completely. So it took them by some days, found all sorts of archaeology, eventually hit the ship. And then it took about 3 months from discovery to get to this stage where the ship was excavated or uncovered and kind of cleaned out with all the loose timbers and it basically exposed. And then it took about 3 months. Once the decision it wasn't initially going to be saved. We don't have time to. It's an amazing story. What happened in the summer of 2002, and there'll be books written about it, I'm sure. The ship wasn't initially going to be saved, but when enough public pressure and enough cooperation happened that money was found to recover the ship, the only way they could recover it, they couldn't raise the whole thing at once. They didn't really want to cut into sections. And so the decision was made to disassemble it into its individual component pieces. So it took about 3 months to uncover what you see there, and then it took about 3 months to completely disassemble it. So they found it in the middle of summer, and then by Christmas, the last pieces were out. So about a 6-month excavation. I probably make it sound a lot easier than it was. It was hugely challenging excavation. Some of the timbers were enormous, and the way they built the ship, the planking shell was fastened together with wrought iron nails. They had largely corroded, and it was easy enough to pry the planks apart, but they used wooden nails, called tree nails, about 30 mil in diameter, and they used these everywhere where a plank and a frame intersected. They would drive at least one of these, drill a hole and drive one of these in through all the timbers. They swelled up, and being the same material, oak, they were just nearly impossible. They're actually still stuck in the timbers today. They had to drive wedges in and get fish little saw blades in and chop each tree nail, each intersection, cut across each tree nail to get. And there were thousands of them, so it was really quite a task to actually take the ship apart. But everything was numbered, everything was labeled, lots of on-site documentation, everything from traditional stereophotogrammetry before it went digital to standard planning and sections, and then the archive's amazing actually because it's everything from like high eight or black and white film to early digital things to slides. It just so much changed in that right around 2000 in how we record and the data, the formats, and all that. So project, the archive's incredibly mixed. Anyway, they did a great job documenting everything and disassembling the ship. Everything was numbered, labeled, recovered. This is what it was like on site. Very, very muddy, but the mud is the reason it was so well preserved. And last pieces came out around Christmas, and underneath one of those, or near one of the big struts, part of the cradle structure, human skeleton was found. And however, it has nothing to do with the ship. It's Iron Age in date, 180 BC, and it is very rare survival from this period in this area. But it just shows that this paleo channel was in existence at least as far back, before the Roman time, before the Romans were here. But it's interesting. It's right up against the bottom of the ship, but it has nothing to do with the ship. But no other human remains were found. So the ship was taken apart into thousands of pieces, and it was waterlogged. So part of the treatment is always keep it wet until you can go through the careful, conservation and drying process. So the timbers were, stored in these. We moved to there a number of sites, and eventually the city got a big warehouse near the docks, and they had 17 5 by 10 meter tanks filled with medieval ship. This is deceiving. The timbers are nice and clean. I took this between like water changes, so normally they'd be submerged in water. But it gives you an idea of the volume of material and the size. This is 5 meters across, 10 meters long. You might recognize these. These are animal ear tags, cow tags, and they were used. They're brilliant. They're totally impervious to everything, and they're absolutely great for labeling, in our case, ship timbers. You can get them printed up in ours, say like Newport Ship, and then have a discrete number. And so, that's one tank, but we had 17. And so it was a huge volume of material. And so starting in 2004, there was like a 1-year pilot study. We basically tested methods. How do you clean this? What's the best way to clean it? What's the best way to document it, record it, photograph, wood science. And so we did that for a year, learned a lot, and then we were successful in getting Heritage Lottery funding, and that allowed us to expand the team. And eventually there were 15 of us working there. And we basically set it up as a huge factory line, assembly line, where we had teams of people and volunteers and students. Sometimes there'd be nearly 30 people in the warehouse, cleaning here, and then documenting. And then we eventually ended up with 3 documentation tables and 4 recording tables. And we managed to document more or less the entire assemblage in 3 years. So cleaning was the first challenge, and this was, lots of dental tools and water and toothbrushes and little hammers and chisels and big hammers and chisels if there were like big iron bolts that had to be removed. So we very carefully cleaned the timbers, and the reason this was so important was I mentioned the timbers were very well preserved. It's fantastic. I've worked on shipwrecks where it's like wet cardboard, or it's a piece of wood that has no original surfaces. The Newport ship, it's like the day it was made. So you have amazing edges. You have all the fasteners. You have we have over 1,000 examples of these inscribed lines and construction marks, like parallel marks. We have converging lines. We have converging arcs. You can see the tree nail, and then this is the nail. You can see the impression of the square rove that they back on the inside, and they pin the nail over that, creates like an early, like a rivet. We're even finding these on the outboard. This is, just really unheard of, this level of preservation. These are like construction marks during the building of the ship. They're everywhere. Now, And this is remarkable too. That's the impression of the nail head. You can see the round impression here, maybe 45 mil across. That's 12 mil, the shank there of the nail. You see the star. That's the blacksmith's maker's mark. That was an impression on the underside of the nail head. And that symbol transferred into the timber when they drove that nail in. That nail dissolved hundreds of years ago, but everything about that nail, even down to that blacksmith's maker's mark, is preserved like as a ghost or an imprint in the timber. So there's great information. I mean, every single plank, we like to say every single plank's a thesis. There's so much happening on each one of these timbers, and there's thousands of them. The tool marks are fantastic. These are axe marks on the underside of a floor timber. And you can see these edges. They're just crisp edges, sharp tool marks, fasteners everywhere. And so really just amazing to work on from an analytical point of view, because it's all the information's there. You just kind of learn how to read it. And then, we did some, I'll show you the documentation. This is one of my favorites. There are so many like diamonds and chevrons on the timbers, and I don't know what they're for, but they're always at the end of a crack. And I don't know if they're monitoring a crack, because sometimes you see it right at the end of a crack, but then the crack will run down the leg or through the diamond and then start again, and there'll be another diamond and another, and maybe it runs again, another one, or else it's actually stopping the crack. I don't know. I don't see how. It's only a millimeter deep, like stamped on with a chisel, but it's a bit of a mystery. We see it all over the place. But it's just this level of fantastic, detail that we've documented it all, but we're still trying to really understand it. So, documenting. This is a huge assemblage of waterlogged wood. If we were to have done one-to-one tracings of every single face, we would have needed another warehouse to store all this material in, all the drawings in. And so luckily the digital technology was coming online at this point, and we were able to, we tested and eventually chose to use contact digitizers, in this case, ferro arms. And these are basically 3D, think of it as like a pen, and as you literally touch the surface of the timber, touch probe it, it keeps track of that in XYZ coordinates and creates a wireframe drawing. And so we made drawings of every single timber, three-dimensionally accurate, or sub-millimeter accuracy and three-dimensional digital data. Amazing when you have that data, what you can do with it. We were able to make 3D models of every single timber. We sent them off to Cardiff. This is back in the 2006-7 when 3D printing was totally experimental. We would email them our models, and they would 3D print our ship parts at 1:10 scale and post them back to us. Took us a few years to, back and forth emailing and then getting boxes in the post. We made this 1:10 scale model of all the articulated timbers, and that 2.5 meters long. And that's only about 800 pieces there, the 800 main structural ones. And then from there, we laser scan that, and we're able to bring that back into the digital world and use that as our foundation for ghosting in the parts of the ship we were missing. And so here you can see what we have surviving up to about the water line. Say that's about 4 meters. And then what you need to make it watertight. And the colors are varying levels of confidence. Brown we have, blue we have direct evidence for, green indirect, but red we do not have really any archaeological evidence, or very not for our ship anyway, but it's based on parallel archaeological evidence or iconography. So, and it's funny, we get the most criticism for the red areas, but we admit those are the areas we know least about. But this is our current best, our working hypothesis for what the ship would have looked like. So, and then being digital, it's amazing what you can do with it. And in this case, cut through it and you can see the hold full of casks of wine, and some people around for scale. So just a note on some of the shipbuilding and the resources. There's an amazing animation which you'll get a link to at the end, and it brings all this to life. From the animation covers building, or starts in the forest, from tree selection and harvest to transport of the timbers to building the ship by the sea to launching it, and then it goes into loading, life on board, traveling across the Bay of Biscay, coming to Bristol, coming to Newport, and its demise in Newport. So I really, really, really recommend you watch that. But I didn't want to take up. It's about 15 minutes long. I didn't want to take that time up for this talk now, so I just threw a few slides in to show you, um, you know, just a glimpse into what it takes to build a ship like this. And now, so none of the timbers in the Newport ship are steamed or bent. They're all sorts of crazy curves, but they're all natural curves. They're grown that way. We have V-shaped timbers, L-shaped timbers, and they would have, looked at the tree and chosen that shape out of the tree there, uh, and created that shape. But there are hundreds of them, so you don't get that many out of a single tree. So huge number of trees were needed to build a ship like this. I mentioned it's clinker built, and clinker built, hallmark of clinker built ships is that when they make the planking is not sawn; it's radially split, and so there's around 1,000 planks in the Newport ship, and typical lengths 3 meters, 3.2 meters, but they vary anywhere between 1 meter and 5 meters, and uh, that's dozens, if not hundreds, of big oak trees to make that many planks. Uh, Interestingly, the forests where these trees were growing are about, I think it's 80 kilometers inland from the coast, from San Sebastian. So it's quite a distance that this material is having to be transported, either by water or over land. And it's a huge effort on its own, just moving the material that distance. Building the ship, you start with a keel, and then you start building the planking shell up. The planks overlap, as you can see here. Once you get the planking to the turn of the bilge, where it starts to go from more horizontal to more vertical, then you start putting reinforcing timbers in, frames or ribs, and fastening those in to give it more rigidity and strength. But it's very much led by the planking shell. They didn't build these ships with blueprints, plans. It is 100% built by eye, and it's maybe they're just controlling symmetry with like a center line and offsets. But what they've created here really is, remarkable. The quality of the ship is amazing. We haven't found any mistakes, any cut corners, any shoddy workmanship. They're chamfering and beveling timbers that are like way down in the ship you'll never see, but they've taken extra care and finishing the edges on them. There's really no real reason to do that, but it's all the timbers are like that. The finish is incredible. So making the nails, blacksmith making the nails. I wanted to show you this, just a bit of a tangent here. So the ship is built in the Basque Country, and the Basques were noted iron workers, miners, and iron workers, and the Basque iron was very very respected. Um, just very quick, like 30 seconds on the resource implication of mining. So there's something like 4.5 tons of iron needed to make the 27,000 clench nails that hold the planking shell of the Newport ship together. So just remember that 4.5 tons of iron. To make 4.5 tons of iron is actually a lot more effort than it sounds. And so you have a scene like this where these are just the iron workers. They have these small mountain forges. They're roasting the ore, breaking it up. They have charcoal being made. There's charcoal over here being made. Someone's bringing that charcoal to them. They're mixing charcoal in the ore. They're firing these for several days, and it's at the end of a firing sequence. Say it takes two people 4 or 5 days to do this. They get more or less maybe a bowling ball size amount of iron, maybe 17-kilo lump of wrought iron, and the ship takes 4.5 tons of wrought iron, just for the iron nails, and there's lots of other iron needed on the ship too. But if we look at this, look over here, this is what's remarkable. We just touched the surface here, trying to track resource implications. And if we just give you one brief example, I mentioned over here 4,500 kilos of iron to make the nails. To and it's 10,000 kilos of ore that you need. The ore is incredibly rich down there. So that's actually a pretty low amount of, or a very good ratio between ore and finished product. But what's amazing is the charcoal, the wood you need. So to make the 4.5 tons of iron, you need 60,000 kilos of charcoal. So let's use tons. So 4.5 tons of iron, you need 60 tons of charcoal. But to get 60 tons of charcoal, you need nearly 500 tons of wood. So you imagine that 500 tons of wood to make 60 tons of charcoal to make 4.5 tons of iron, and that's just for one ship. And that's not even all the iron it's going to take. So we are looking at, they've done great work on this up at Roskilde at the Viking Ship Museum, and on resource implication, resource footprint, energetics. And it's just amazing. We can just, want to track this for all the resources. I want to try to see what the true implication for building a ship like this. And I suspect that it reaches into absolutely every corner of society at this time. We found animal fiber mixed with a tar in the overlaps, and that animal fiber is other places on clinker built ships they'd use moss, but in the Newport ship's case, it's 100% animal fiber, and it's everything from cattle hair, horse hair, but predominantly wool, waste wool, from the like as a byproduct of the spinning process. But so it's a mix of everything. They're taking anything they can get. But it's interesting. The animal fiber, the cattle hair, horse hair, it's tannery waste. You can see it's coming off, it's still clumped together where it's been scraped off the hides during the tanning process. It's an industrial byproduct, seemingly worthless, except the shipwrights are using vast amounts of it. So it's looking at, so we've only scratched the surface in terms of resources, and I think it's so interesting. We have such a well-documented case study in the Newport ship, and it allows us to kind of extrapolate. We have known quantities to start with, in the ship, and then we can, work backwards and see what the implication was, I guess further upstream. So again, don't get me started on resources, but here you have the ship taking shape. You have the framing timbers and the what are called futtocks, the higher up framing timbers being inserted to give it more strength. You have more bracing timbers. This is the big mast step. The big foot of the main mast would have been stepped right here, and it was heavily braced on both sides and really interlocked together. Here they are tarring the ship inside and out, and here's it getting close to being launched. Once it's launched, rig it and fit it out, and then and outfit it, as in get provisions or recruit a crew. And it's only at that point that you're able to start sailing and start getting a return on your investment. I really think this ship represents, it may be a really standard merchant ship for its day, maybe a medium large example. There would have been dozens like it, but I really think this wasn't two men and a boy in a shed building this thing. This is really state level enterprise. And if we assume it's Basque Country, Basque built, they wouldn't have just had this one ship in the shipyard. They probably would have had several on the go at different stages at the same time. But just given the quality of the materials, the consistency of, even down to the diameter of the nails, they're handmade, but exactly the same diameter. The shanks are the same. The tree nails are the same. The patterns are amazing. It's all indicative of a very high level of control. And also, you back up and just think how much organization, labor organization, how much capital is needed up front to build a ship like this. It's got to be state level enterprise. And yeah, so let me switch gears slightly and just show you a really brief glimpse about some of the artifacts, some of the objects that were found. This is a French coin that was found purposely embedded in the keel. This coin was put in there as a good luck charm, minted for a few months in 1447. It's French, but that's not the significant part. What's significant, it has a cross on it, and the cross is facing up. All right. And it was a good luck charm. It was put there because it was the most vulnerable part of the ship, and it was supposed to give it divine protection. Handful of other coins, all Portuguese. This was a Jeton merchant's token that was found as well. But these are just very small denomination coins that were quite common on ships. You lose things and they clatter down into the bilges and get trapped there. And so this is where the vast majority of the small finds came from. And so being well, tons of leather survived, and leather being an organic material was really well preserved, just like the timbers. This is one of those pointy-toed shoes, a poulain, and it has even so well preserved, it had the moss packing in the tip of the toe that helps it keep its curl. So if leather's your thing, we have boxes and boxes of it that were recovered. We have a few textiles. We have wooden combs. One of the other wooden combs is double-sided, coarse for straightening, fine for getting the lice out. Carved wooden gaming pieces. We have stone shot. So the ship would have been armed, but we know the ship, they must have had enough time to salvage the ship during this refit when it fell over. The ship would have had big anchors. It would have had huge blocks and pulleys and all sorts of other equipment. All of that's missing. We find stone shot, but we don't find the guns. But look at the scale. So the little one's about the size of a golf ball, and the big one's about the size of a cricket ball. This is pretty small, but you have to remember this is very early for gunpowder or for guns on ships, and this is mid 15th century. The ship wouldn't have been armed for really offensive purposes, but these are very much defensive weapons. Really, it has such a valuable cargo that it's no surprise that it was defended. Really interesting object. This was fragments of an iron helmet were found down in the bottom of the ship, and it's a really quite incredible. It's a biblical verse in Latin around the rim of the helmet. It's I think it's Luke 4:30. It's some famous biblical passage giving the wearer divine protection. But what's really weird about this is that it's remember the ship's 1450s, 60s. This is Italian and it's from the 1300s. So it's a mystery. It's already quite an antique. And why is it smashed up in pieces in the bottom of the ship? So just a mystery that's on our big list of mysteries. Oh, I mentioned the rigging. Tons and tons of blocks and pulleys and even fragments of cordage surviving, but nothing's big. I don't think there's a single Newport ship artifact that you couldn't lift with one hand. And you contrasted that with Mary Rose, and have enormous blocks and pulleys and things like that. I really think they had time to salvage a fair bit of really anything big, anything really valuable. It's just the loose stuff that fell down inside the ship. Of really a great interest to me anyway, is the pump. There's actually at least there's a number of different pumping positions on board the ship, and we find fragments related to the pumps all over the place. From this wicker like filter basket down in the pump well to this is a reconstruction, but we have the leather cone, we have the foot valve, we have fragments of the base. We even have fragments of actually a chunk of the bored out elm tube that was used as the pipe, as the pump sides of the pump. So really great, fantastic selection of items relating to pumps on board the ship. And this is the earliest of this type of pump, this common pump that's been found. It was initially, before this, thought to be 16th century, but now we can show that it's back into the 15th century. The mud preserved things fantastically, including amazing insect remains. And they took hundreds of environmental samples, didn't have time at the time to do anything with them. They sat in their rubble sacks tied up tight, and it took us 5 or 10 years to get around to opening them, still wet, and did flots, residues, all the standard environmental processing. What came out of that literally doubled our knowledge about what life was like on board. And so just amazing range of foodstuffs, insects, animal bones, fish bones, really amazing what was found. It really informed us about what the ship was doing, where it was trading. I already mentioned it's engaged in this seemingly just on this kind of north-south run on the Atlantic coast there. There's nothing on board that's Baltic. There's nothing that's demonstrably Mediterranean. There's really nothing that's really British on board the ship. It is so absolutely Portuguese. That the assumption at the moment is that it seems to be, Portuguese crewed and owned. And they seem to be taking one major wine voyage a year. They wait until the grapes are harvested late summer, wine is made, and they race it up, unload it in the early autumn, and then perhaps they overwinter, but it looks like you'd expect to find some, local stuff on board. There's really nothing, and it looks like going back down, and then preparing the ship again for the voyage. The weather's too rough over the winter. They may do another voyage in the spring if there's any wine that's left that's still good. It doesn't last very long, and there's insatiable demand for wine up in Britain, and so it's as much wine as they can bring up, they can sell, and fabulously profitable. Uh, so we'll move on swiftly. I think there's tons of animal bone, monster medieval chickens. There's 17 different kinds of fish and shellfish found on board. There's basically every barnyard animal you could name was found. Uh, this was great. This was just shows you the power of environmental evidence. You've got this huge amounts of this material, Western prickly juniper, and this stuff grows on the coast of Portugal. It's really, nothing eats it. It's a pretty worthless plant, except the ship's absolutely full of it. And it was found mixed with these crowberries and this heather that was blooming. And this is a late summer phenomenon. There's vast amounts of this in the ship. So late summer, what's it doing? Well, they're filling the ship with it right before they take on their cargo of wine. They're putting a massive amount of this we call dunnage, this kind of padding inside the bottom of the ship, and they're putting the casks of wine on that. And it was, half of every environmental sample was just these little leaves. And so but it ties up with seasonality. It ties up with the wine trade. It just reinforces this interpretation that the ship is engaged in this major trade in red wine during this period. I didn't mention it, but the loss of Gascony in 1453. I can see a situation here where the ship was built in response to that. French and English weren't getting along, but the Portuguese and the English are getting along fine, and so the Portuguese can see an opportunity here, and they can say, "We got to get in on this wine trade. Let's get the Basques. They're great shipbuilders. Let's get them. Let's contract with them to build a big ship for us." And in response to that opening up of that or that economic opportunity, and the ships trading in that kind of the late 1450s into the 1460s. Just another cutaway view of the ship shows you about division of space and the cargo down here, and you can see the livestock here in the back, and people scattered everywhere. So probably preempt a lot of your questions. We do not know the name of the ship yet. There's been loads of historical research that's been done, and it continues to be ongoing. I don't think if we knew the name of the ship, it would actually change our interpretation of it in any meaningful way. It's just very clearly a merchant ship, and and I think the environmental evidence has really really painted a clear picture of what it's engaged in. There is a really interesting letter, though, and it's written by Earl of Warwick the Kingmaker, and it says, "Fix my ship in Newport," and it's dated 1469. And so that's exactly what's happening to this ship in Newport in 1469. And what's happening in 1469? Well, you're nearing the culmination of the Wars of the Roses, and so the Newport ship is operating against this really politically tumultuous backdrop. And I mean, Warwick was a bit of a pirate as well, so it's really. It's possible the ship has something to do with Warwick and the Wars of the Roses, but apart from this letter, it's a lot of things line up, but it's still circumstantial. So our job as archaeologists is to sort out the material remains, get it conserved, and then turn all of our information that we uncover from the archaeological side of things, turn it over to historians. And in fact, they're very excited right now because the dendro dates are so precise, they can go back now and start looking for timber contracts in the Basque Country. I really think there'll be great stuff in foreign archives relating to this because somebody lost huge when the ship wasn't at the end of its life. It had this accident, and there will be records of it. Catastrophic loss for somebody happened in Newport because they have amazing, commercial records. They have insurance. They have court records. I'm sure sooner rather than later, I think the historians will, given that we have such tight dates now and locations, that they'll eventually, you know, um, find more historical stuff related specifically to the Newport ship. So switching gears very quickly to conservation. After we cleaned everything, recorded everything, we started the conservation process. Similar to what the Mary Rose did, we used polyethylene glycol wax, but we didn't have to spray it. We actually had the timber soaking in water. The wax is water soluble. We soaked the timbers in the wax solution and then freeze dried them. And it was, we had the freeze dryer in Newport, York Archaeological Trust. It was there. Then we also used Mary Rose, their freeze dryer. The ship's been all over the UK. Like Arctic Glory. The scale of this is really hard to overstate. These huge amounts of effort, time, money over the years have gone into this project, and the conservation was really an epic undertaking. But so timbers would go off, they'd come back, they'd be sorted and filed away. This was the last load coming out of the freeze dryer at Mary Rose. So as of 2 years ago now, the entire assemblage, all the timbers, all the artifacts, everything is dry. And so fully conserved, strong and stable. And so what we have now, I like to think of it, we're kind of in stage or step like 4 out of 5. The entire ship is conserved. And now the ultimate goal of the entire project has always been reassembly and display. And that means reassembling the original timbers and rebuilding the ship in a museum. And so that's what we're working on right now. We are doing trial reassemblies of small sections. And we know that other archaeological ships on display around the world have major problems with, they're just not adequately supported. The material is being asked to do too much. And we know that the peg is needed to conserve the timbers, but there's a couple of problems. The peg can soften up the cell walls, making them less rigid, and therefore just less strength. But really, a bit insidious is that the peg actually goes between the wood cells. It bulks up the wood cell, but it can go between the wood cells as well. And it can act as a lubricant, and the wood cells can slide past each other, just like microns. But you imagine thousands of wood cells, tiny bits, sliding past each other when they're under a load. And what we're finding is that, this material may look strong, but it doesn't have the strength it once had. Plus, the ships are never designed to be out of water. They're designed to be supported by that universal, even support that floating in water provides. So we're working with Swansea Uni. We're doing all sorts of analysis on our timbers, Department of Engineering there, to figure out how strong they are and what we can get away with in terms of twisting and bending and loading. This is work that's happening right now. And all of this is going to feed into big engineering models, FEA, finite element analysis models of the ship, to figure out where the stresses are, where the problem areas are. And then we want to build a cradle to address those problems and hopefully avoid the issues they're having with, for instance, the Vasa, where it's deforming. And so we were really lucky in a way. Vasa and Mary Rose, they never took them apart. They refloated them, brought them to shore, built the museum around them. We have an option here that they didn't have because we're in thousands of pieces. We have that extra challenge. We have to put it all back together, but it gives us this opportunity to actually build a cradle first, perhaps a big shell, and then put the ship on, attach it to the shell on the outside, put all the timbers on the inside, and effectively add a new layer into the sandwich of the ship. And basically, imagine walking into the ship and not seeing any cradle. It's hidden inside the structure of the ship. That's kind of the concept we're working on right now. And we're hoping to progress into doing a trial reassembly of the whole ship. And while we do that, hopefully the city's doing a big feasibility study about finding the best way forward for the ship project in the City Museum and Art Gallery. And depending on the results of that, yeah, I'm really hoping we get a new museum art gallery for Newport with a dinosaur-sized hall in the middle of it that we can eventually rebuild the ship in. But in the near term, I think our best bet is to do a trial reassembly, just roughly with scaffolding, at least get it reassembled and on temporary display, so that we can continue our research into the ship. If you want to know more about the ship, there's tons of stuff out there. There is 4 IJNA articles about the ship in the International Journal of Nautical Archaeology, really comprehensive articles. There's a big book about the kind of the bigger picture. There's a bit about the archaeology, but it's more about the Newport ship's role in the trade, economics, and politics of this, 1450s, 60s. All the contributions are about the Newport ship, just putting it, looking at it from different angles. We have a great new guidebook that's available, and really, really impressive online archive. The ADS has archived, I want to say it's 17,000 files. It's all of our drawings, photographs, models, everything is there. It's all free. It's all accessible. So you just Google ADS Newport ship, you'll find that. And we're so lucky. We must have 30, 40, 50 of these specialist reports. So if you want to know about the animal bone, the fish bone, the tar, the glass, some of the selected artifacts, there's by specialist, they're detailed specialist reports. They're completed. They're in the ADS archive, and they're all free. So you have at it. And so why are we doing this? Well, people love ships, and we have something here in Newport that's older than the Mary Rose, older than the Vasa, and we have done all the hard work over the last 23 years to get it, conserved, analyzed and conserved. We're now ready to rebuild it and get it on display. And so that's where our efforts and attention are at the moment. This Vasa is the most impressive thing I've ever seen in a museum, and it's in Stockholm. I would encourage everyone to go see it. There's so many ways to access ships. There's so many things to talk about and show off, and people love ships. And you look at the most popular thing in Portsmouth would be the historic dockyard. Most popular thing in Bristol, SS Great Britain. I'm sure Cutty Sark, Belfast, they're top 10 in London. You have these amazing, the Vasa in Stockholm. You have these, and just all over the world, people love ships, and you've got something in Newport that's really significant in its own right. It just needs to be, put on display. So if you want to know more, come visit us. We're open every Friday and Saturday to the public, Easter through Halloween. And we have one huge open day every summer, and that's on the 26th of July, Saturday, the 26th of July. It's free. The whole parking lot's filled with reenactors, and it's a great day. We'll get 1,000 or 2,000 people there. It's an amazing event. So please come to that. If you like less crowds, come any Friday or Saturday in Newport. It's all, free parking, all that. And if you really want to know more, just keep eye out for, there's a major documentary coming probably within a matter of a couple of months on Sky and history. They've been working on it for a few years, and it's done. It's ready to go. So it'll be it's on Sky History, and then there's a Welsh one on S4C. So it's all about the Newport ship, and I hope, I haven't seen any of it, but it should go global, and it really should raise the profile of this project. So there's a lot of exciting things happening, and it's been 23 years, and that may sound like a long time, but ship projects take decades. They're never really finished, but we are really entering this phase now where we're going to get it put on display. And so then you have an amazing display, an asset that you have in perpetuity. So that's where we're at right now. And I think you'll get a link to the animation. And if not, you could probably try Vimeo and Newport ship, and it might come up. But anyway, it's a link there as well, or maybe in the chat. But anyway, I think I'm not too much over time. I'm very happy to answer any questions, and I really hope that you can come down and see us any Friday or Saturday, until November.
Fantastic! Wow, Toby, that is just fantastic. It's left so many. We've got loads of questions. I'll go through those all in a moment, but before I start those, I just wanted to say thank you so much for a wonderful talk. And I'm aware that every single thing you've talked about, there's so much more that you could have said, and there's just years and years of research there to go. But I best start on the questions. First one, in looking at the reconstruction picture you've got, apparently looks very much like the Matthew, not a vessel I'm familiar with, but does it compare to that vessel?
The Matthew is not based on any archaeological
Right. Okay.
evidence. It's based on iconography, and it's carvel built, so it's built in a different style. But yeah, from a distance, they are similar ships. The Newport ship is. You notice I never said what kind of ship it was. It's really hard to put a name on ships in this period. They're changing so much, and two people might call the same ship totally different names. But most people are probably familiar with like galleons. The Newport ship kind of looks, geometrically like a galleon, but built completely differently. It's we're still working on that.
It's a life's work by the sound of things. Another question: what was the most unexpected object that you discovered?
There's a feature on the ship, and if I remember correctly, it is a hole in the timber, like in one of the big framing timbers that's been chiseled in, and they found it was filled with mud and chicken feathers, and it was sealed over, like capped.
Yeah.
And so, what that means, that's either construction or use life. The mud seeped in later. This must have just been a secret hole filled with chicken feathers.
So some sort of good warding against evil spirits or something, or
yeah. What do they call that? Ritual.
Ritual. That's the word we always use as archaeologists when we're not quite sure. Someone else says, fantastic talk. Were there any, when it was first found, were there any test pits in the area around in case there's anything else there? And I know another question has said, could there be another Newport ship there?
Okay, there were the geotechnical side of things. They did core through the area to characterize it before development. They may have cored through the ship. I don't. So it's there's undoubtedly other things there. It was solid archaeology all the way down, and they weren't able to dig any deeper than that.
Yeah,
just that skeleton, and then they were gone. Look at the chances. They dug one hole.
Yeah, it's just
to find this. So I really think this type of material is everywhere.
Yeah.
This was 7 meters. I mean, this is very, very deep. It's you think all the obvious stuff's been discovered, and it's no.
Yeah, so it was they only dug down the 7 meters because it was going to be the orchestra pit. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done and wouldn't have found it.
Just you think about all the chances of even back to the architect in the office laying things out, and all these things lined up.
Just luck.
I'm absolutely certain there's because there's loads of these inlets, and people often drag watercraft into inlets, and we see that all over Europe,
all around our coast.
Yep.
Yeah. Perhaps at the moment they're best stay buried. Otherwise, we've got a real financial headache, I guess. Fun thing that I found fascinating is the Iron Age skeleton. You just don't find Iron Age skeletons in Wales.
And it's the Crick Institute came and sampled it along with some of the other material we have. So we have, early days they said there's nothing, at the time there was no possibility of any DNA or anything, but now it's moved on so much. It was quite surreal. They were all in their suit in the ship center, sampling.
Yeah. Fascinating. Another question: were there any personal items found? Well, I think you had shown some. I think, but mostly things to do with the ship.
No. There were tons of. The ceramics are amazing, and I'll give you one example with the ceramics. There's water costrals, these Portuguese ceramic jugs, like one handle, and some of them have like like a name on them
Uh-huh.
scratched on there, and they're all the same size. And you look at it, and the Portuguese ceramics person said, "Oh, these are we get these all the time. These are water costrals. They're they're with the crew. That's their ration of water for the day or for their ship, and that's it. They get their 1 or 2 liters of water,
Uh-huh.
and or wine or cider, whatever it is. That's and so they're filling that off a bigger thing.
So they'd have each had one.
Each had one, and that's why they
Yeah.
have their name. And then some of the ceramics are soot stained. All the ceramics, none of it's uh cerealware, stuff that you would say is cargo. It's
Mm.
individual items.
Just
Some of
things
it's
that
soot stained.
their kit.
It's daily items in use on
Yeah.
board. It's I think I'm drawing a blank, but there are tons of personal
Mm.
artifacts on board. It's just I didn't have time to. This is the
Obviously. Yeah. Someone did ask how many people would have been on board.
uh, we think between 40 and 60 because
Oh,
the modeling we've done shows that's how many people are needed to actually use like a capstan or a windlass to lift the main
mm.
yard and the main
Right.
sail. That's how heavy it
Yeah.
is.
Right.
But we've had some debate on that. Maybe we're not giving them enough credit or something. We
Mm.
maybe it's fewer than that, but it's the some of the records, historical records allude to pretty sizable crews,
Mhm, mhm.
merchants,
Yep.
passengers on board. Oh, there's no sleeping areas. There's no
Mm.
cabins. There's no toilets. I'd love to see a reality show where they do this nowadays, and people wouldn't last three
Maybe you
hours.
wouldn't want to be there, but
No,
yeah.
try to put some modern people through one of these 2 or 3 week voyages on this ship.
Oh,
You got to remember
yes.
there are no charts, no radar, no weather, uh,
Scary. Yeah.
and the clothing. We're just not. I think they're made of sterner stuff.
Yes. And another question. Um, when the ship fell on its cradle or whatever the accident that happened at the dock, would that have meant that part of the dock couldn't be used anymore and would have affected sort of the economics of Newport a bit at the time, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's there were several of these hills because there's a bunch of hills there, and each between each
Oh,
hill,
yeah, yeah, that.
a stream runs down, and it's so tidal that when the tide's down, the streams are still running and they erode these canyons. There was one, not even 50 meters, another main, big, even bigger one.
Mm,
This
mm.
one definitely blocked the pill, but they did immediately at some point. You can't quite say when, but maybe within a century, uh, they probably seem to have cut the top of the frames of the ship,
All right. So
and
that they
then
could
put a
reuse.
cobblestone
Right.
key
Ah,
across the whole thing. So
right.
that that happened, you know, at some point after its loss. It's but so they maybe lost the ability to park a ship there. But if you look at Newport and the later developments there, it was so tidal, the entire site of the before they didn't build any docks, they would
They
bring the ship
would have pulled in
right up
anywhere. Yeah.
and just right against these wharfs and
Um,
load and unload.
Fantastic. Thank you. Um, Linking back to what you were talking about a modern day people living on one of these ships, could we make one of these ships today? Would the construction be possible today?
I would say no. If put it this way, if you offered someone like a 10 million pound prize and said, here's 300 oak trees, no, make them go harvest the oak and
Yeah.
transport it, and only use axes and adzes and
Yeah.
spoon
Yeah.
drill
Yeah.
bits.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if I think it would fall down on just the timber procurement and transport, but
Yes.
also on the actual conversion of the timber from tree in the forest to planks,
Mhm.
only radially splitting. This is where it's this is what I want to do more with the resources.
Mm.
This is immense amount of labor and time to
Yeah.
do this.
Just one ship, one vessel,
One
when they'd
vessel.
have been making lots,
Yeah,
building
and
lots.
we have there's a historic shipyard in Albeola in called Albeola in San Sebastian in Pasaya. They're just finishing a really authentic replica of a Basque whaling ship from about a century later that
Uh-huh.
was found over in Red Bay in Labrador.
Someone
Uh,
asked about that ship. Yeah, yeah.
so that is just about finished. We have great links with Albeola. They're an amazing organization, and they have, they want, they've talked about building a replica of Newport, and so they would be the best placed people to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
it. But I always say, we'll help them all we can, but we have a problem in front of us here, which is we have to reassemble the real thing
You've got
first.
to finish doing what you're doing first. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that whole question of the resources, it's so easy to discount all of that, but all the effort of all the different elements going into it, never mind producing the wine that it's transporting. Another couple of questions on this theme. What threats would the ship have faced on its journeys between the ports? And is there any evidence that it was attacked or it had to defend itself?
Yeah, threats would be storm damage and grounding, and so it's we do see on the ship that the places you can't, when a clinker built ship, because the planks overlap, when you crack a plank
Mm,
or starts leaking, you can't actually get that plank out.
of
You
course.
have to simply put timber over it. It looks like a plaster.
Yeah.
We call them tingles, and so they you can see them a mile away. They're clearly repairs. There's nothing else they can be, and some of them have dated to, they're not part of the use, or they're not part of the construction, they're part of the use life, so they've dated to say the early 1460s
Mm,
or mid 1460s, and maybe they're making running repairs, but it's the location that's key on all these. They are either at the widest point of the ship going around
mm,
where it would bump up against like a wharf, or they're right at the turn of the bilge where the ship would rest on the mud and
mm,
by necessity would roll to gently to one side or the other, and they're right where that would point, it would point load. And we see those repairs, those
oh,
tingles, those patches on both sides and up
mm,
here and right at the bow. It must have been leaking a bit up there, and they put extra wood on there. So it's yeah, those are the, and then obviously you have piracy because there's such a lucrative,
all right.
target. And you remember with piracy, the cannons at this time, the guns, they're not, it's not like broadsides and victory and all that.
Mm.
And they
There,
don't
there,
want to destroy the ship. They
yeah, there
want,
is like the cannon is as likely to explode on you, I think, isn't it, at that sort of
yeah,
time?
the stone shot will actually shatter when it hits. So it's very much anti-personnel. It's not going to
Yeah,
really
yeah,
hurt the ship.
yeah.
And you don't want to hurt the ship. You have three objects. If you're a pirate, you want the ship, you want the
Mm,
cargo, and you want the crew. All
mm,
of them are valuable. And so,
mm.
the tons of threats. It's amazing. It's amazing. They
More questions, so we'll just carry on for another 5 minutes if that's okay with
fine.
people. um, you did allude to this, the question, have any Basque or Spanish archaeologists been involved in either the excavation or post-excavation work? You referred to historians, but I wondered, the question asking about archaeologists, and something that struck me when looking at the carpenter's marks, are there any, can you see similarities back in the Basque area?
So yeah, we tried to look at, say, Basque numerals, and just we could get nothing to line up. We have great links with Basque archaeologists and Albeola, and they're doing amazing stuff down there, looking at
Mm.
their own resource, looking at iron, looking at timber,
Yes, all that.
and
Yes.
so
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say I don't think we've had any Iberian staff members, but we've had tons and tons of
A lot of
but
links.
it's odd in a way because we had at the peak there were 15 of us, archaeologists and
Mm,
conservators, and we had 9 nationalities,
fantastic.
at the peak. uh,
Mm.
was there another part to that, or is that okay?
No, that was it. One other question, though. Was any sea life found on the external parts of the ship? And if so, could that help identify where it had been? I suppose you've got the insects and the fleas and things, but any
Yeah.
other things?
We found barnacles, and the they were definitely use life, not post deposition. It was sealed in. Really amazing. There's no shipworm damage whatsoever because Teredo's shipworms, they're a New World pest, and they came back
Oh,
with Columbus.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
the Newport ship was dead and buried by the time. I mean,
Yeah.
Columbus was a kid when the Newport ship was around, but the Newport ship was sealed in its nice little
Mm.
area
You couldn't get
by
to
the
them.
time Teredos got back, and it was never touched. I don't think there's one wormhole in anything. But anyway, the barnacles, they're not uh, very well preserved. They're just not conclusive. I
Uh-huh.
think you need more than the shell. But I'm not really. I really think we have the sphere of operations nailed down to,
Mm.
this. Some of the environmental evidence, the ceramics, the coins, is so specific to
Yes.
very small areas like the Algarve coast.
So you can tell you don't need all the environmental side to sort of back it up because it's so obvious.
I have to say I really have to give credits like Newport about the city council, the museum. They've really let us do best practice,
Mm. Fantastic.
go into real, you know, real detail, real deep analytical detail into all these different areas.
Mm.
And so it's just,
It's just
and
so
that's
valuable.
I don't think we were anywhere near done with it. We just, new analyses come online, or we just, meet a new person who says, oh, have you done this? And so
That's that.
we're so
Well, that
open
leads.
source as a project.
Yeah, leads to another question here. Does every ship recovery teach us more and more about preservation techniques and everything, all the other issues you've been talking about? I guess yes.
I'd say absolutely. And I think nautical archaeology is really it's like a big family. There's only a
Mm.
few hundred of us
Mm.
in Europe anyway. And, I, everyone at the big conferences,
Yes.
the meetings, and everyone shares. And also, I
Yes.
also think it's a bit of a generation thing too, is we want to give all of our data to anyone. And so
Yes.
we are, and we're public. We should be.
Yeah.
So
Yes, a lot of public money as well. But yeah, but aside from that, it's that wanting to share, and then you learn, don't you? If just in conversations you have, things come up. Another question: were there internal structural members, deck beams, stanchions, etc.?
yep. Uh, uh, Not really articulated, but there were
Yeah,
loads
but
of things. And the most interesting were the hatch covers. We found
oh,
5 hatch
yeah.
covers intact, all identical. And it's amazing because they tell you so much. They tell you the size of the hatch and which matches the size of the cask.
Mm-hmm.
And they are right there. We have lots of carlings. We have technical bits of timber that are really only they're totally identifiable as the
You know,
combing or the
mm,
ledges or things that you see
mm,
on sailing ships.
yeah.
Um, but the hatch covers imply that the ship was decked, but not only decked, that it was watertight.
Mm, oh,
So because
right.
the
Yes.
hatch covers are in such a way that they're
That would seal and keep the water out.
so I know they salvaged tons of the ship and tons of it was taken away, not just for the timber, but I think they were burning it for the iron because
Right.
iron was practically semi-precious and there was so much
Mm,
iron in the ship. It
mm.
gone now, but back in the 1460s would have been a great, easy resource. Humans are lazy. They're not going to go into the forest to cut down
Absolutely.
a tree.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Re-
bet there's Newport,
Recycling. Yeah,
there's Newport ship in people's houses in
I
the old
bet.
part of town.
We'll make this the last question, which is what level of support did the National Lottery provide? And then you mean, what is the overall budget? I guess that's almost a figure you can't say yet because you're not
Yeah.
there.
So, first part, lottery. Yeah, lottery gave us it was about 800,000 back in 2005, 6, and that was for the
Which was a lot more then, wasn't it? Yeah.
major documentation and uh, cleaning, recording, documentation, and also that helped us. It was like the seed money for starting the conservation. Uh, it's really I couldn't put an exact figure on it, but it's definitely in the millions, and that we've spent over
Mm,
the years.
obviously.
And but most of that was probably excavation. Uh,
Mm,
it really is a very modest.
mm.
I'm the only one who works there, so it's
And weighed
and
up
I've been
against.
alone for 10 years now, I think.
Yeah,
So it's but we have the Friends of the Ship, an amazing organization, and
yeah.
do so much for the project, and we will definitely expand.
Absolutely. And the amount of information and research that you're getting out is just phenomenal. And I think we better wrap up now. I guess if people do have other questions, they can email them into CBA and perhaps they can be forwarded to yourself. But speaking on behalf of everybody, it's been a wonderful talk tonight. Fantastic. I heard about the ship when it was first discovered and all the hoo-ha of the actual excavation, but it's just wonderful to see just how far you have come. And thank you so much for a fantastic talk this evening. Thank you, Toby.
Yeah, no problem. Come visit.
Hope so. Good night, everybody.